A widowed billionaire saw a nanny breastfeeding his baby. And what he did next would change not only her life, but his forever. Inside the quiet mansion, the cry of a 2-month-old baby echoed like a painful scream cutting through the walls. For hours, no one came. The hired nanny had disappeared. The billionaire was locked in his office with work, and the baby's voice was fading into weakness. Downstairs, a young black woman named Elena Brooks wiped the same patch of marble floor again and again, her mind drifting far from the bucket beside her. Each sound from upstairs made her chest tighten until she could barely breathe. It had been 6 weeks since she lost her own newborn son. 6 weeks since she last held a tiny, warm body close to her heart. Since that night, every time a baby cried, something inside her broke. She whispered softly, "Please stop crying, little one." But her voice was drowned by another desperate wail from the nursery. Elena pressed her hands to her ears, her eyes burning, but the sound seemed to come from inside her chest now. The walls of the grand mansion felt like they were closing in on her. The golden lights, the polished furniture, the silence of wealth. None of it could hide the pain that echoed through those walls. Upstairs, baby Liam lay in his crib, his small face red and sweaty. His lips were dry, his mouth searching weakly for milk that was not there. The bottle beside him had gone sour, its smell filling the room. The nanny, Sophia Reed, had left hours ago, saying she needed to buy new formula, but she never returned. She was at the mall, laughing with friends, shopping for things that cost more than her heart could hold. In the office below, Alexander Hayes, the billionaire father, sat before a screen filled with business charts and numbers. His tie hung loose, his face pale with exhaustion. He had not truly slept since his wife Isabella died giving birth to their only child. Every night he worked until morning, chasing success to escape the silence that reminded him she was gone. The crying from upstairs reached him even through his closed door. His hand paused over the keyboard. For a moment he thought of standing up, of checking on his son, but the meeting with investors in Japan was still running. Voices calling his name. "Mr. Hayes, are we ready to proceed?" Someone asked. Alexander blinked, forcing himself to answer, "Yes, continue." But the cry did not stop. Downstairs, Elena dropped her cleaning rag. Her heart pounded, her legs moved before her mind could think. She ran up the stairs, one hand on the railing, her lips whispering, "Please, God, let the baby be all right." Her breath grew short as she reached the nursery door. She pushed it open and what she saw froze her in place. Baby Liam lay limp in the crib, his eyes half closed, his breathing shallow, his skin burned with fever, his tiny fists opened and closed as if searching for help. Elena rushed forward, lifting him gently into her arms. His small body was hot, trembling, and so light it scared her. The spoiled milk bottle rolled off the table and hit the floor with a dull sound. Elena's heart raced. "Oh no, please, not again," she whispered, her hands shaking as she cradled him close. The baby's lips moved weakly, seeking something that was not there. In that moment, something inside Elena woke up. She remembered the nights she used to feed her own son, the sound of soft breaths against her chest, the comfort only a mother could give. Her arms trembled as she realized what her body was still capable of. 6 weeks had passed since her loss, yet her body still produced milk. She had prayed for it to stop, but now maybe this was why it had not. Tears filled her eyes. She sat down in the armchair beside the window, holding Liam close. "I am so sorry, little one," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I cannot lose another child. Not tonight." With hands that shook, she unbuttoned her blouse just enough to bring him close. The baby found her warmth and latched on. The room fell silent. For the first time in hours, Liam stopped crying. The only sound left was the faint, steady rhythm of his breathing and the soft whisper of Alina's tears falling on his blanket. She held him tighter, rocking gently, her whole body relaxed as she felt his strength returning. In that moment, she forgot the mansion, forgot her job, forgot the world. All that existed was a hungry child and a grieving heart that had found a reason to keep beating. Minutes passed like hours. The baby drifted to sleep, his small hand clutching her blouse. Elena looked down at his peaceful face, and her heart ached with love and pain mixed together. "You're safe now," she whispered, brushing a tear from his cheek. "You're safe." But then the sound of footsteps came from the hallway. Heavy, slow, each step closer than the last. Elena froze, her breath caught. She looked toward the door as it creaked open. Alexander Hayes stood there. His eyes widened as he saw her sitting with his son in her arms, her blouse slightly undone, the baby sleeping quietly against her chest. The light from the window touched both their faces, painting a picture that words could not explain. For a long second, Alexander did not move. His mind could not make sense of what he was seeing. The silence in the room grew heavier. Then his voice came low and rough. "What are you doing?" Elena gasped softly, clutching the baby closer as if afraid someone might take him away. Her face turned pale. "Sir, please, I can explain," she stammered, tears rising again. Alexander stepped forward, his expression unreadable. Part of him wanted to shout, to demand an answer, but another part saw what his mind refused to deny. His son was peaceful for the first time in days. The cries had stopped. The feverish red on the baby's face had faded. Elena's voice shook as she spoke. "The bottle was spoiled, sir. He was burning with fever. I could not watch him die." Alexander's jaw tightened. He looked from her to the baby and then back again. Words failed him. The air in the room was thick, filled with confusion and emotion. For a moment, he turned away, trying to control the storm building inside him. Elena sat trembling, not knowing what would happen next. Her hands held Liam close, afraid that letting go would mean losing another piece of her heart. The clock ticked loudly in the silence. Outside the sky darkened and a soft rain began to fall. The house stood still, caught between judgment and mercy. And in that stillness, both Elena and Alexander knew that whatever came next would change everything. The rain outside the mansion grew heavier, the drops tapping softly against the glass like a warning that something painful was about to unfold. Elena Brooks sat frozen in the armchair, her arms still wrapped around baby Liam, her blouse was partly buttoned now, her hands trembling. Across from her stood Alexander Hayes, the billionaire whose face was caught between anger, confusion, and disbelief. The silence between them was thick, almost unbearable. Elena opened her mouth to speak, but her voice broke before words could form. "Sir, I know how this looks," she whispered, her eyes shining with tears. "But he was dying. I swear I only wanted to help." Alexander stared at her for a long time without speaking. His thoughts were a storm. He saw his wife's face in the framed picture on the wall, her warm smile, her promise to raise their son together. Then he looked at Elena, this woman who had just crossed a line no one in his world would ever understand. "You fed my son," Alexander finally said, his voice low and heavy. "Without permission." Elena flinched as if the words struck her. "He was burning with fever," she said softly. "He could not breathe. He was starving, and the milk in the bottle was spoiled. I did what I had to do to keep him alive." Alexander ran a hand over his face, pacing back and forth. His mind fought between gratitude and anger. His heart knew his son was safe because of her, but pride refused to bend. The rules of wealth, power, and appearance screamed louder than his feelings. Finally, he turned to her again, his voice shaking slightly. "You should have called me." You should have waited. Alina's tears fell freely now. Wait, she repeated quietly. Sir, if I waited, your son would not be breathing right now. The sound of her words filled the room like a prayer. For a brief moment, Alexander's face softened, but he quickly looked away. You can go downstairs, he said after a long pause. I will call for the doctor. Elena hesitated. Please, sir. He's asleep now. Let him rest. Alexander's tone grew cold. Leave, Elena. Her lips trembled, but she obeyed. She laid Liam carefully in his crib, her hand brushing gently over his small chest. Sleep well, little one, she whispered through tears. Then she stepped back and walked out of the room, her heart breaking with every step. When she was gone, Alexander stood over the crib, watching Liam breathe softly. For the first time in weeks, peace had returned to his son's face. Yet inside Alexander's chest, guilt and confusion battled fiercely. He sat down on the edge of the bed, covering his eyes with his hand. The image of Elena holding Liam would not leave his mind. It wasn't the image of wrongdoing, but of love, the kind he had not seen since his wife died. In the hours that followed, whispers began to grow in the mansion. Sophia Reed, the nanny who had abandoned her post, returned later that evening. When she found out what had happened, her eyes widened. She did what? Sophia gasped. One of the maids nodded nervously. The billionaire caught her feeding the baby. Sophia forced a laugh, but her heart filled with jealousy and fear. She had left the child unattended for hours, but now the attention would shift to Elena, the woman who had done her job. How disgusting, Sophia muttered under her breath. Who does she think she is? By morning, the gossip had reached beyond the walls of the mansion. Neighbors whispered over fences and staff spoke behind Elena's back. Some called her desperate, others called her unstable. She lost her child, one said. Maybe she's trying to replace him. The words hurt like knives, but Elena stayed silent. That evening, Alexander sat in his office, his head buried in his hands. The phone on his desk rang. It was Victoria Lang, a wealthy neighbor known for her sharp tongue. Alexander, dear, she began sweetly. I heard about the little situation. You must be careful. Women like that can become dangerous after loss. People are talking. Alexander clenched his jaw, forcing himself to stay calm. Victoria, please, it's a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding, she said with a small laugh. She nursed your child as if she were his mother. That is not a small thing, Alexander. For your reputation's sake, let her go before things get worse. The call ended, but her words stayed. That night, Alexander stood at his office window, watching the rain slide down the glass. He thought about his late wife, her soft voice, the way she used to sing to Liam when he kicked in her belly. Then he thought of Elena, crying quietly while holding his son. A part of him wanted to believe she meant no harm. But the world he lived in was cruel. Appearances mattered more than truth. The next morning, Elena was summoned to the office. Her steps were heavy, her heart filled with dread. Alexander sat behind the large desk, his face pale. Elena, he began quietly. You have been kind to my son, and I am grateful. But what happened cannot be ignored. Elena's throat tightened. Sir, please, I only wanted to save him. I would never do anything wrong. I know, Alexander said quickly, his eyes softening. But people are talking. They are questioning my judgment, my family, everything. I have to protect my son from more gossip. Tears rolled down Elena's cheeks. You think I am a danger? Alexander looked away, unable to meet her eyes. No, but this situation has gone too far. Please let me stay until you find someone new, she begged. No one knows me. He won't eat without me. But Alexander's mind was already clouded by pressure, fear, and pride. I am sorry, "Elena," he said in a low voice. "You are dismissed." Elena's legs went weak. She held the edge of the desk for balance. "Please, sir," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Just let me say goodbye to him." Alexander turned his face away. "No, it's better if you don't. He'll forget in time." Her heart broke in silence. She gathered her small bag, her hands shaking as she stepped toward the door. Her eyes met his one last time. "He won't forget," she said softly. "Children remember love even when adults pretend not to." The door closed behind her. That night, the mansion felt emptier than ever. Liam cried again, the sound echoing through the halls like it had on that first night. Alexander rushed to the nursery, holding his son. But no matter how much he rocked or sang, the cries grew louder. The baby turned his face away from the bottle, searching for a comfort that was gone. Alexander sank into the armchair, exhaustion in his eyes. "Please, Liam, stop crying," he whispered. But the child did not stop. Outside, rain washed over the windows as if the sky itself wept. Inside, a billionaire and his son sat in the dark, both broken in their own way. One missed a mother's touch he never knew, and the other missed the woman who had shown him what love really looked like. The morning sun barely touched the windows of the Hayes mansion. It was supposed to be a house of comfort and security. Yet silence and sorrow filled every room. The cries of baby Liam had not stopped since Elena Brooks left. His voice was tired, his breaths weak, and his small hands kept reaching for someone who was no longer there. Alexander Hayes sat in the nursery. Dark circles under his eyes, his shirt wrinkled, his heart shattered. He had not slept, not even for a moment. The bottle lay untouched beside him, the milk turning cold. "Please, Liam, drink something," he whispered softly, trying to guide the nipple to his son's lips. But the baby turned away, his cries breaking into painful gasps. Alexander rocked him gently, walking in slow circles across the floor, but nothing worked. "It's all right, my boy. Daddy's here," he said. But the words felt hollow. He remembered the night he fired Elena. The tears in her eyes, the sound of her voice saying, "Children remember love even when adults pretend not to." Those words kept echoing in his mind, growing louder with every minute. His son refused to eat. Sophia Reed entered the room, her face tired, her perfume thick enough to mask her guilt. "It's just a phase," she said with a shrug. "Babies do that sometimes." Alexander turned to her, anger flashing through his exhaustion. "A phase? He hasn't eaten properly in 2 days." Sophia stepped back slightly. "Maybe he just needs time. I'll try again later." She left quickly, leaving Alexander alone again with his son. Liam's cries grew softer now, not from calmness, but from weakness. Alexander's throat tightened as he held the tiny body close, feeling how fragile it had become. He pressed his lips against the baby's forehead and whispered, "I'm sorry, son. I failed you." Later that evening, Alexander called a doctor. A woman in her 40s arrived, gentle in voice, but serious in expression. She checked Liam carefully, her stethoscope cold against the baby's thin chest. When she looked up, her eyes were full of concern. "Mr. Hayes, physically, your son seems fine. But this is not just about the body. This is emotional." Alexander frowned. "Emotional? He's just a baby." She nodded slowly. "Even infants form bonds. If that bond breaks suddenly, they can lose the will to eat or sleep. It's called emotional separation trauma. He's grieving just like an adult would." Alexander's heart sank. "Grieving? Yes," the doctor said quietly. "It seems your son has lost someone he deeply trusted." Her words hit him like a wave. He knew exactly who she meant. He stared at the floor, guilt twisting inside him. "If I bring her back," he asked softly, "will he recover?" The doctor sighed. If the bond is that strong, she might be the only one who can reach him again. After she left, Alexander sat in silence for a long time. He stared at the crib where Liam lay, his breathing shallow. The mansion felt too big, too quiet, too empty. Every corner reminded him of what he had done. 2 days passed, and Liam's condition worsened. He was taken to the city hospital where doctors placed him under special care. Machines beeped beside his small body. Tubes carried milk that he still refused to take. Alexander stood at the side of the hospital bed holding his son's tiny hand, tears he had held back for months finally falling. "I thought I was protecting you," he whispered, his voice cracking. "But all I did was take away the one person who made you feel safe." At that moment, everything he had worked for, money, power, pride, meant nothing. None of it could save his son. Back in the mansion, Sophia packed her things quietly. Her hands shook as she folded her expensive clothes into her suitcase. The guilt she had buried for weeks was now too heavy to hide. That afternoon, when Alexander returned home to pick up some clothes, he heard voices near the garden. Curious, he stepped closer and saw Sophia handing over a box of Liam's medication to a man in a black jacket. "This one's expensive," she whispered. "You'll make a good profit." Alexander's heart stopped. He watched as the man slipped money into her hand. His blood boiled. Without thinking, he stormed forward. "Sophia!" Sophia jumped, her face turning pale. The man ran off. Alexander grabbed the box from her hand. "What is this?" he shouted, his voice trembling with rage. "Mr. Hayes, I can explain," she stammered. "Explain? You're selling my son's medicine." His eyes were full of fury and disbelief. Sophia's lips trembled. "I needed money. My mother is sick. I only took a little." Alexander stepped closer. "How long have you been stealing from me? How many times?" Sophia burst into tears, collapsing to her knees. "Please forgive me. I was jealous." "All right. Jealous of her, Elena. You trusted her more than me. I told everyone she was mad that she tried to replace your wife, but she was only helping your son. She saved him that night. I lied because I wanted her gone." Alexander froze. Her words echoed like thunder inside his head. "She saved him," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Sophia nodded, crying harder. "Yes, she saved him. I made everything up." Alexander stepped back, his heart pounding painfully, his hands trembled as the truth sank in. Elena had not done anything wrong. She had risked everything to save his son, and he had thrown her into the streets. Without another word, he turned and walked away. His vision blurred with tears. Inside the mansion, the lights seemed dimmer, the air colder. He sat in his office, his hands clutching his head. The image of Elena standing in the rain, begging to say goodbye, replayed over and over in his mind. "What have I done?" he whispered to himself, his voice shaking. "Dear God, what have I done?" That night, Alexander could not stay still. He called her number, but it was disconnected. He drove to her old apartment, but the landlady said she had left weeks ago with nothing but a small bag. She didn't say where she was going. He asked desperately. The woman shook her head. "No, sir." She looked tired, like she hadn't eaten for days. Alexander thanked her and left, but inside he was breaking apart. He spent the night driving through the streets of New York, asking anyone he saw if they had seen a young black woman with a maid's uniform and tired eyes, but no one had. Hours turned into days. Liam remained in the hospital, growing weaker. The doctors warned that time was running out. Alexander's once steady voice now cracked when he spoke. The guilt ate away at him like a sickness. On the 4th night, his phone rang. An old raspy voice spoke on the other end. "Are you the man looking for Elena Brooks?" Alexander's heart jumped. "Yes, please. Do you know where she is?" My name is Samuel, the man said slowly. She used to stay with us under the bridge near Avanita. She's sick. If you care about her, come quickly. Alexander's breath caught in his throat. I'm on my way. He grabbed his keys, his coat, and rushed into the storm outside. The rain soaked him completely as he drove, his mind full of images of Alina's smile. Her tears, her voice saying, he'll never forget. When he finally reached the bridge, he parked his car and ran into the shadows. The air smelled of damp earth and sorrow. Under the bridge, he saw a small group of homeless people huddled together. And there, curled in the corner, was Elena. Her face was pale, her hair tangled, her clothes wet from rain, her body looked weak, as if the world had taken too much from her. Alexander froze, unable to speak. The sight of her like that broke him completely. Elena, he whispered, stepping closer. Her eyes opened slowly, her voice faint. What are you doing here? I came for you, he said softly. Please, Elena, come back with me. No one needs you. He's in the hospital. He's dying. Elena looked away, her lips trembling. I already saved him once, Mr. Hayes. And you threw me away. Why now? Alexander dropped to his knees in front of her, tears falling freely. I was wrong. I was blind. Please don't punish him for my mistake. He remembers you. He needs you. Elena stared at him in silence. Her heart was torn between anger and compassion. The rain fell harder, the wind cold against her skin. Slowly, she nodded. I'll go, but only for the baby. Alexander's tears mixed with the rain. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you. As they walked toward his car, Elena stumbled slightly. Alexander reached out, steadying her gently. For the first time, his hand didn't carry power or pride, only guilt and care. The road ahead was dark and wet. But for the first time in a long while, Alexander felt a small light of hope flicker in his heart. He prayed silently that it would not go out again. The drive to the hospital was quiet. The sound of the rain against the car roof was the only thing that filled the silence. Elena Brooks sat in the passenger seat, her hands folded tightly on her lap, her clothes still damp, her body weak, but her spirit strong. Alexander Hayes stole glances at her from time to time, but every time their eyes met, she looked away. The pain between them was too deep for words. When they reached the hospital, nurses rushed to lead them through the hallway. The smell of medicine and disinfectant filled the air. Alexander's heart thudded in his chest as they reached the room. Behind the glass, baby Liam lay small and still, tubes running from his tiny body. His cheeks were pale, his chest barely moving. Elena pressed her hand against the glass, her eyes filling with tears. Oh, Liam, she whispered softly. A nurse opened the door and nodded. You can go in, she said. Elena walked slowly toward the crib. Her legs shook with every step. She bent down, brushing her fingers against Liam's fragile hand. His skin felt cold. It's me, she whispered, her voice trembling. It's Elena. I'm here now. The baby stirred weakly, his eyes opening just a little. For a second, she thought she saw a spark of recognition, but it faded quickly. Elena turned to the nurse. Please, let me hold him. The nurse hesitated, then looked at Alexander. He nodded quietly, his eyes already wet. Elena gently lifted Liam into her arms. The room fell silent as she pressed him close to her chest. She began to hum softly, the same lullaby she used to sing to her own son before he passed. Within moments, Liam's breathing began to steady. His small hand gripped the fabric of her dress. His lips moved weakly, and a faint sound came from him like a sigh of relief. The doctors standing nearby exchanged glances of surprise. Alexander stepped closer, watching with wide eyes as life seemed to return to his son. Tears rolled down Elena's cheeks as she whispered, "That's it, little one. It's all right now. You're safe. The machines that had been beeping rapidly began to slow down, the monitors showing signs of improvement. The lead doctor looked at Alexander. This is incredible, he said quietly. Sometimes a child just needs the comfort of the person they trust most. Alexander nodded slowly, his heart swelling with emotion. He turned his face away for a moment, hiding the tears that had started to fall. Elena stayed by Liam's side for hours. She fed him slowly, sang to him softly, and rocked him gently until he finally fell into a deep sleep. Every movement she made was full of tenderness, like a mother who had finally found her lost child again. Alexander sat in the corner, his hands clasped together, his mind racing with guilt and relief. Every time he looked at Elena, he saw not just the woman he had wronged, but the savior of his son. When Liam was finally asleep, Elena placed him gently back in the crib and pulled the blanket up to his chin. She turned around, her eyes tired but calm. Alexander stood up slowly. His voice was low when he spoke. Elena, I owe you my son's life. Elena shook her head softly. You don't owe me anything, Mr. Hayes. I didn't do it for you. I did it for him. Her words stung, but he knew she was right. He nodded slowly, his throat too tight to speak. For a while, neither of them said anything. The silence between them wasn't cold anymore, but heavy with truth. The next morning, Liam was much better. The nurses smiled as they checked his vitals. He's recovering faster than expected, one said. Alexander walked into the room with 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Elena. I know you probably don't trust me, he said quietly. But I want to make things right. Elena took the cup, her hands still trembling. What can you possibly do to make this right? She asked. Alexander looked at her for a long moment. Tell the truth, he said. That afternoon, Alexander called his lawyer and arranged a press conference right inside the hospital. Reporters and cameras filled the lobby. Elena stood in the back, unsure if she should even be there. Alexander stepped up to the microphone, his suit wrinkled, his eyes tired but determined. I need to say something that I should have said weeks ago, he began. Elena Brooks saved my son's life. Every rumor you have heard about her is a lie. She is not what people called her. She is brave, selfless, and the reason my son is alive today. The room was silent, except for the sound of clicking cameras. I made a mistake, he continued, his voice breaking slightly. I let pride and gossip blind me. I failed to see her kindness, and for that I will carry guilt for the rest of my life. Elena stood still, tears streaming down her face as she listened. The words she thought she would never hear were finally being spoken. By the end of the conference, the story had spread everywhere. People who once whispered behind Elena's back now praised her courage. Sophia Reed, the nanny who had lied, lost her job, and disappeared from sight. That evening, Elena went to see Liam one more time before leaving. The baby was sleeping peacefully. She smiled faintly, brushing a hand over his small forehead. You'll be all right now, she whispered. As she turned to leave, Alexander was standing by the door. Elena, he said softly. Please don't go. She stopped, her back still facing him. I came for the baby, not for you, she replied quietly. I know, he said. But still, please stay. Not as a maid, as someone who belongs here. Elena's breath caught in her throat. You think you can erase everything that happened? No, he said, his voice filled with emotion. But I can try to make sure it never happens again. She looked at him for a long moment, unsure if she could ever trust him again. Her heart wanted to stay, but her mind told her to leave. I'll think about it, she whispered at last. Alexander nodded, his eyes glistening. That's all I ask. That night, for the first time in months, Alexander sat beside Liam's crib as the baby slept. He glanced at the chair where Elena had sat earlier, her gentle voice still echoing in his memory. In the quiet of that hospital room, he finally realized that money could never heal what love could. And somewhere in her small rented room across town, Elena lay awake, tears slipping down her face. Not from pain this time, but from the strange feeling that maybe, just maybe, life was giving her a second chance. The soft light of morning filtered through the hospital window, washing the room in a quiet glow. Baby Liam stirred gently in his crib, his cheeks no longer pale, his breathing steady and calm. Elena Brooks sat beside him, her hand resting lightly on his blanket. It was the first morning in weeks that she had smiled without hiding it. Alexander Hayes stood near the door, his hands in his pockets, watching the two of them. The sight of Elena humming softly to Liam filled his heart with emotions he could not put into words. Gratitude, guilt, admiration, and something deeper that frightened him because it felt like love. He walked closer, his voice soft. "The doctors say he can go home in a few days," he said. Elena nodded, her eyes still on the baby. "That's good news," she whispered. Alexander hesitated. "Elena, I meant what I said yesterday. You are not just an employee to me. You are family now. If you would let us be your family, too." Elena turned to him, her eyes glistening. "Family," she repeated quietly, her voice trembling. "I used to think I lost mine forever. My son, my home, my peace. I didn't think I'd ever have that again." Alexander stepped closer. "You gave me back my son's life. The least I can do is make sure you never suffer again." Elena shook her head slowly. "I don't need money, Mr. Hayes. I just need peace." He looked down, his voice low. "Then let me help you find it." Days passed and Liam continued to grow stronger. When it was finally time to leave the hospital, Alexander asked Elena to come back to the mansion. She hesitated for a moment, but when she saw Liam reaching his tiny hands toward her, she couldn't refuse. Back at the mansion, everything felt different. The same halls that once echoed with silence now carried the soft laughter of a baby. The same rooms that once felt cold now felt alive again. Elena was no longer treated as a servant. Alexander made sure she had her own room, her own space, and above all, her dignity. Every morning, Alexander joined her to feed Liam. Sometimes their hands brushed when passing the baby bottle, and they would share a small, quiet smile. Elena's heart softened a little each day. Though she tried not to show it, she still carried the pain of betrayal. But the warmth in Alexander's eyes began to melt the walls she had built around her heart. One evening, after putting Liam to sleep, Elena stepped into the garden. The air was calm, the sky painted with fading gold. She sat on the bench, closing her eyes for a moment, letting the cool breeze touch her face. Behind her, Alexander walked out quietly. "You used to clean this garden," he said softly. "Now it feels like it finally has life again." Elena smiled faintly. "I cleaned it because it reminded me of home. My mother used to grow flowers by our window. When she died, I promised myself I'd always keep something alive, even if it was just plants." Alexander sat beside her. "You've kept more than that alive, Elena. You brought light back into this house." She looked at him carefully, unsure how to respond. "Sometimes, I wonder why life brings people together through pain," she said quietly. "Maybe it's so we can see love when it finally appears." Alexander's heart ached at her words. He reached into his pocket and took out a small box. Elena looked at it surprised. He opened it slowly. Inside was a simple silver ring. "Elena," he began softly, "I made the worst mistake of my life when I let you walk away that night. I judged you when you were the only one who truly cared. You saved my son when I couldn't even save myself. I don't want to lose you again." Elena froze, her hands shaking. Mr. Hayes, what are you saying? He looked at her with steady eyes. I'm saying I love you. Not because you saved my child, but because you saved me, too. You showed me that love is not about wealth. It's about kindness, sacrifice, and truth. You are everything this home was missing. Please, Elena, will you let me spend my life proving that to you? Tears spilled down Elena's cheeks. She looked at the ring, then at Alexander, then at the small window glowing from the nursery where Liam slept. Her heart felt heavy and light at the same time. I don't know if I'm ready, she whispered. I've been broken for so long. Alexander reached forward gently, taking her hand. Then let me help you heal one day at a time. For a long moment, Elena said nothing. The wind moved softly through the trees, the scent of roses filling the air. Finally, she nodded slowly. If this is real, if it's not pity, then yes. Alexander smiled through his tears and slipped the ring onto her finger. Elena covered her face with her hands, crying quietly. He reached out and pulled her into a gentle embrace. You are not alone anymore, he whispered. From the window above, baby Liam stirred in his crib and let out a soft sound as if he knew that something beautiful had just begun. Months passed, and the Hayes mansion was no longer a house of grief. Laughter returned, meals were shared, and the sound of Liam's tiny feet began to echo through the halls. Elena often sat in the living room reading to him while Alexander worked nearby, watching them both with quiet joy. On a sunny afternoon, Alexander took Elena and Liam to the park. They spread a small blanket on the grass, sharing pastries and laughter. Liam toddled around happily, his little arms stretched toward the sky. Elena laughed as he stumbled into her arms. Alexander sat beside them, his eyes full of warmth. Thank you, he said softly. Elena looked at him curiously. For what? For bringing life back into this world, he replied. For reminding me what love looks like. She smiled, her eyes filling with tears again, but this time they were tears of peace, not sorrow. As the sun set, painting the sky with orange and pink, Elena leaned her head on Alexander's shoulder. Liam slept peacefully between them, wrapped in a soft blue blanket. Alexander whispered, "This is what home feels like." Elena closed her eyes, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, this is home. And there, under the golden light of evening, a broken heart found healing. A grieving father found love. And a little boy found the family he was always meant to have. But the story didn't end there. As the months turned into years, Elena and Alexander's bond grew deeper, woven with threads of shared memories and quiet moments. One day, Elena discovered she was pregnant, a surprise that filled the mansion with new hope. Alexander was overjoyed, vowing to be the father he hadn't fully been before. They prepared a nursery next to Liam's room, painting the walls in soft pastels and filling it with toys. Liam, now a curious toddler, would pat Elena's belly and say, "Baby," in his sweet voice, making them both laugh. Yet, shadows from the past lingered. Elena sometimes woke from nightmares of her lost son, and Alexander would hold her, whispering reassurances until dawn. He started a foundation in Isabella's name to help grieving mothers, and Elena joined him, sharing her story to inspire others. Their wedding was intimate, held in the garden where Alexander proposed. Liam carried the rings on a tiny pillow, stumbling cutely down the aisle. Friends and family, including some who had once gossiped, now celebrated their union. Victoria Lang even attended, offering a sincere apology that Elena graciously accepted. As their new baby girl arrived, named Grace after Elena's mother, the family felt complete. Alexander stepped away from much of his business empire to focus on them, realizing true wealth was in these moments. Elena taught him to cook simple meals from her childhood, and they spent evenings dancing in the kitchen while the children watched. Challenges came, like when Liam got sick with a fever, reminding them of that fateful night. But together, they faced it, Elena's calm presence soothing everyone. Alexander learned to listen more, to let go of pride, and Elena found strength in forgiveness. Years later, as Liam and Grace grew, the story of how their family began became a bedtime tale, edited for little ears. Once upon a time, Elena would start, a kind woman saved a crying baby, and love changed everything. Alexander would add, and they lived happily, because they chose each other every day. The mansion, once a symbol of isolation, became a hub for community events, helping those in need. Elena's journey from loss to love inspired many, and Alexander's transformation from distant billionaire to devoted family man showed that change is possible. Through it all, their love proved that from the darkest pain can bloom the brightest joy. They traveled as a family, visiting places Elena had only dreamed of, like beaches where the children built sandcastles. Alexander surprised her with a trip to her hometown, where they planted flowers at her mother's grave, honoring the past while embracing the future. Back home, they hosted holidays filled with laughter, inviting orphaned children to share in their abundance. Elena wrote a book about her experiences, becoming a voice for single mothers and those facing prejudice. Alexander supported her, proud of the woman who had saved him. As the children grew older, Liam asked about the scar on Elena's heart, the loss of her first son. She told him gently, teaching empathy. Grace, spirited and kind, mirrored her mother's compassion. In quiet evenings, Alexander and Elena would sit on the porch, watching sunsets, hands intertwined. "I never imagined this," Elena would say. "Neither did I," Alexander replied, "but I'm grateful every day." Their story spread further, inspiring films and articles, but to them, it was simply life, messy, beautiful, redeemed by love. And so, the widowed billionaire and the compassionate woman who changed his world built a legacy not of wealth, but of healing hearts and unbreakable bonds. Dear viewers, this story reminds us that sometimes love finds us in the most unexpected places. It teaches that real family is not built by blood alone, but by compassion, forgiveness, and the courage to see the good in others. Elena lost everything, yet, her kindness saved a child and healed a broken man's heart. Alexander had all the money in the world, but it was the love of a humble nanny that brought warmth back into his home. If this story touched your heart, tell us in the comments where you are watching from and what lesson you learned from it. Your words inspire us to keep sharing stories that move souls and remind the world of what truly matters. Please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that love can heal even the deepest pain. And if you want more emotional stories like this, comment more stories below and you will be the first to get our next heart-touching release. Now tell us in the comments. 1. What part of this story made you emotional? 2. Do you believe forgiveness can build new beginnings? 3. If you were in Elena's place, would you have done the same thing for the baby? Your answers will help us understand what love means to you.